Arrival. Most of director Denis Villeneuve's previous work, all of which has been brilliant, focuses on the darkest depths of humanity. Torture, self-destruction, shadowy people pulling the invisible strings of influence, fun stuff like that. In this sense, Arrival is quite the departure, as the movie's more interested in what we can accomplish when we cooperate, when we plan, when we rise to meet an enormous challenge. The enormous challenge the characters must rise to meet is one that Hollywood has seemingly always had a fascination with, and thus one that we've been collectively half expecting for decades. First contact with alien visitors, or invaders, as the case may be. Linguist Professor Louise Banks, played by Amy Adams, is recruited by the U.S. Army to assist the government in figuring out how to communicate with a large alien ship that has mysteriously appeared in rural Montana, one of 12 identical ships that have simultaneously parked in seemingly random locations throughout the planet. While other countries do the same, Dr. Banks and physicist Ian Donnelly, played by Jeremy Renner, lead the Army's effort to find out why the ships are there, placating the understandably nervous Colonel Weber, played by Forrest Whitaker, and other excitable government officials who are preparing for the worst. It feels appropriate to stop there with the plot summary, because Arrival is surprising and rewarding in ways that are enhanced the less you know beforehand. Notice that I didn't say that the rewards are dependent on knowing little beforehand. Just enhanced. What I will say is that the movie tells a large-scale global story with a relatively narrow personal focus. Despite the fact that the happenings of the plot potentially affect every living human, the narrative remains confined to just the Montana landing site, and to Dr. Banks's individual progress and struggle with her task. And what we eventually learn, if I may be purposefully vague, is how much her personal struggle and the larger-scale global situation are intertwined. And the ending, which I can't talk about, is so friggin' good. It's the first time I've ever felt compelled to go home and write specifically about the ending of a movie immediately after seeing it. It's also the first time I've ever started crying in my car in the theater parking lot. I turned on the radio and Time by Hootie and the Blowfish started playing. There was nothing I could do. It's difficult to really talk about how substantive the movie is without spoiling things. So if you've seen the movie, you can find more substantive discussion here. And if you haven't seen the movie, trust that it's substantive? Also, get on that. It's also refreshingly smart, always respecting the audience's intelligence while still dumbing down the complicated shit so that we can understand it. Whenever Amy Adams pulls out a whiteboard to explain something, she's always believably explaining it to another character. It never feels like the exposition is directly for us, but it also doesn't feel like any one character exists purely to get exposition explained to them. Yeah. This screenwriting podcast I listen to makes a distinction between mystery and confusion, and the fine line between the two. It's remarkable when a movie like Arrival can navigate that line so splendidly. And even though it's both smart and substantive, most importantly, it's not boring. It's very well paced. The whole movie is shrouded by this overall sense of dread, that the aliens are going to do something cataclysmic, or that humanity is going to do something cataclysmic. Amy Adams, my favorite Oscar-less actress, is brilliant as usual. She rides the line between vulnerability and strength. Is anyone better at writing that line than Amy Adams? But it's a pretty restrained performance. The movie is full of people really unsure of what to do, making decisions that have enormous consequences, just trying to do their best.
We need to make sure that they understand the difference between a weapon and a tool. Language is messy, and sometimes one can be both.
And because there's, appropriately, so much focus on the pressing situation at hand, there's not a ton of room for the characters to breathe. You don't leave the theater feeling like you really know Colonel Weber or Agent Halpern, but you know enough. You learn about them through how they react to the situation, what their priorities are, what they fear, what actions they take, what actions they fight against. I guess you could call the movie efficient with its characters. This is a long way of saying that Amy Adams is given more to work with because of the aforementioned focus on her personal struggle, in addition to the alien situation at large. And yeah, it's kind of weird that Amy Adams was nominated for a Golden Globe, a SAG Award, a BAFTA, and a Critics' Choice Award, but then wasn't nominated for an Oscar. But to me, that snub is kind of softened by the fact that the movie snuck in with a picture, director, and screenplay nomination, putting it in really good company. I don't think it'll actually win in any of the 8 categories for which it's nominated, but it could have. The Academy made a ruling that Moonlight's screenplay would compete in the adapted screenplay category instead of the original screenplay category. I won't bore you with the details of the ruling, but just know that Moonlight sort of fell into a gray area between the two. Putting Moonlight in the adapted category is good for Moonlight, because it's pretty much guaranteed to win there. While had it gone original, it may very well have lost to La La Land, or Manchester by the Sea. But it also sucks for Arrival, because if Moonlight wasn't in the adapted category, Arrival screenwriter Eric Heiserer would probably be the frontrunner. But whatever. I'm thinking more and more that the Oscars are less about who wins and more about shining a spotlight, drawing people's attention to certain movies. And Arrival deserves all the attention that it gets. I took a class in college called Philosophy of Science Fiction, and one of the things I walked away from that class with is that science fiction, or at least good science fiction, normally has a point of view. Sometimes it's socio-political, sometimes it's philosophical, you get the idea. And that's why I love Arrival. It's as tense and thrilling as you expect from sci-fi, and it's as thought-provoking as you hope for from good sci-fi. That's why I think it's one of the best movies of 2016 and one of the best science fiction movies in years.